And it looks like we're live. Thank you everyone for joining another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. We'll be following along in the agenda that was created, the agenda issue that was created in the NPM RFC's repo. That was issue number 330. You can follow along and feel free to add yourself to the meeting notes doc, the HackMD doc there that I just shared in chat. Feel free to add yourself as an attendee. As usual, these calls and all communications on the RCs and all NPM repos are covered under a code of conduct. So we just ask that you please be kind when others are talking, raise a hand, and I'll call upon you if someone else is talking. And yeah, you can read more about that code of conduct on npmjs.com itself. There's a link there in the issue. Just wanted to open the floor for folks if there's any announcements that anybody had. If not, the one announcement that we still have an open position posted on the github.com careers page. So we're looking to build up the team a little bit here. Feel free to share that with your networks if you would like. And yeah, if there's no other announcements, folks, or news that folks would like to share, we can dig right into the agenda. So the first item that we had was issue 327. I believe, Isaac, this was yours. It's being closed, so potentially we can remove the agenda label. This was for dropping support, installing other optional dependencies with force. No, you just joined, but did you want to give an update? I think we can drop the agenda here.
We did a bit of investigation on this and decided it did not merit further discussion in an open RFC, in an RFC process. Basically, what we found. So in NPM, if you have an optional dependency and the platform, like the OS or CPU, does not match what's stated in the package JSON as a requirement for that package, we don't bother to install it. The thinking being, it's probably not going to work, and it's optional anyway. And there are packages out in the wild that depend on this. And we had a regression. We had a bug where we were trying to install them and then just kind of relying on them failing to build. But if you have, let's say, a bunch of precompiled binaries, which are all 4 different platform versions, and then you have them all listed as optional deps with the understanding that you're only going to get the one that works, then obviously this is a problem because they're precompiled, so there's no build step. While we were investigating that, we found that NPM 6 actually would install a mismatched platform optional dep if you had specified force. And the reason is that it went through the same code path where if you did npm install foo and it was a mismatched platform, we would just ignore the warning if you did -- force. So what we decided was, doing this for optional deps, like we already have this way to install a proper dependency if you actually depend on it and you want it. For optional deps, you really don't want some optional dependency, which is platform specific, buried deep in your tree, even if you're installing with force. And if you do want it, there's a way to get it. You just install it. So yeah, so we just decided this is a foot gun. It's a foot gun that's been around for a long time, and it's very unlikely that anybody's depending on it behaving the way that it is. So we went ahead and removed it.
I just I removed the agenda label from it.
Yep.
Any other comments on that from folks?
I mean, if anybody here wants to say, actually, I really want to install nested, other platform optional dependencies with -- force, then I'm wrong. And let's totally dig into that. But I think that's unlikely. It's a very obscure kind of a thing.
Cool. Moving on then to issue number 325, the RRFC for pre-install, post-install scripts on a single package installation. I believe we spoke a little bit about this last week. And I see that there was some update between our last call. Looks like Carl responded.
So I think the this kind of gets to, we discussed this a little bit internally. I don't see Carl on the call, so I'm gonna just kind of present a little bit of context around this. We discussed this a little bit internally, and I think essentially what we need here and what we may want to roll this RFC into is the need for a general purpose, like the package tree has been changed script. Because I think repurposing pre-install and post-installs is sort of mixing the semantics in a way that's not great. Pre-install, post-install should be, do these things when you install this thing. And we do that on a no arguments npm install because presumably you need to act as if you have just been installed, right? That's kind of the context you want to get your project into when you run npm install. But if we're also doing that, if we're running the top level install script when something else is installed, like that's kind of not what it's for. And it mixes the semantics of when that script gets run. So what I think we very much need is a on mutation type script or something that's like, I've added a new dependency, I have removed a dependency, I did something to change the package tree. So if you need to do anything because every time the package tree changes, go ahead and do it now. And that seems to be the use case. It's a use case that we have in the CLI ourselves, actually. We just have to always remember to run this script to like properly get our bundles and our get ignores set up properly.
Yeah, I see Jordan, you have your hand up, and then I also have a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add on to what Isaac was saying. That to me, it's pre-install and post-install scripts should be when you install this package into a different project, and that the completely valid use case of I want to be able to run some scripts when someone types a bare npm install. I think that's the use case that should have something else, right? Like, I'm not suggesting we deprecate the way that currently works or anything like that, but that like if I would hope that this mutation hook or whatever also runs when I type a bare npm install and doesn't run when my project is installed somewhere else. And if that's the case, then to me that actually matches my intuition, which is that there's a difference between whether it's the top level, the app, or whether it's as a package in someone else, in another app's tree. Yeah. So does that align with your thinking, Isaac?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think then there's kind of an open question, small question about like, do we run install before or after the mutation event, lifecycle event? Probably I would assume that I don't know offhand. But basically we would need like a the package tree is changing script. We also might want to have something maybe separate from that, or maybe one thing is enough to satisfy both use cases, but a like the package tree is being reified type of event. Because there's kind of a, like if you have a shrink wrap file and you run npm install with no arguments, you have a shrink wrap file and no node modules, and you run npm install, we're not changing the ideal tree. We are reifying it, so that feels somewhat different from I've gone through and resolved all your dependencies, right? So if you ran npm update, okay, well we're changing the ideal tree. We're changing kind of what is in the lock file, and they're similar but subtly different.
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that those are differences in the npm implementation, but I'm not sure that's something developers have literally any concept of. Yeah. I think like there's really kind of two directions that I think we should decide. One is, do we go with do we list out the use cases we want to support and make a script for each, or like a hook for each, or whatever you want to call it? Or do we have one big old hook, with pre and post, but like that provides, like, I don't know, environment variables or something to describe the change being happening? Because I can imagine people wanting to do something different on npm install versus npm ci versus npm install like into a certain dependency bundle or bucket versus npm uninstall, and so on.
So I think the answer there is we don't describe in any great detail the command or the change that's being made, because it gets very, very convoluted and complicated to do that. I think the npm command environment variable and the process argv should really give you everything you need. If you need more information, then like read the package tree or read the package JSON, the package lock JSON. Like, and we can have a pre that runs like the main script and the pre-script can run like before any changes have been made, and maybe the postscript is run at the very, very end. So,
but like you'd still want to know, I think, like when you do the version scripts, depending on whether you're in pre-version or post-version or version, like the information you can read from package JSON and the information that you need to know, either what's going to be changed or what it was before, like, is different. And so you kind of need to provide both of those pieces of information. Like,
right, and we do on version, one. I believe we have the old version and new version.
Exactly. And so I'm saying that in the pre-step, you can look at the file system to know what's there, but you need to have some way to know what's coming. And while, yes, you might be able to infer it from the command string, that seems brittle to me. And then similarly in the postscript, you'll know what's already there. You'll know the after state, but you won't have any way to know what it used to be unless, like, I don't know, the original package JSON and lock file are put in a temp directory and those file paths are injected as environment variables or something, right? Like, so I think that there's probably there's a lot of exploration to be done there to like figure out how to support the use cases so that the proper information is available. And I really would dread writing or maintaining a script that tries to look at how the exact spelling of the npm command they ran, and then figure out, like, infer what it did,
Yeah, so I think that for things that need to do a more or less stateless, like anytime the package tree changes, I need to update my bundles, right? My like Webpack bundles.
Right.
For example, like you don't really need to know the pre and post state for those. You might be able to get a little fancier, whatever, but like you can also just look at file change times and stuff. And I would really want to see a use case that needs that, because it is somewhat costly to, both in complexity and in time, like runtime cost to gather that info and make it available. It's going to be a big thing on the environment. It's easy to get wrong, that kind of stuff.
Well, and that cost sort of implies that maybe we should then design for separate scripts for each use case rather than trying to inject, information to solve all use cases into the one script. And if that's the case, then it's totally fine, because new use cases that pop up later, we can just add a new script and it's fine, right? So
yeah, I mean, as the CLI maintainer, I very much want just tell me that the tree has changed. Like I'll figure out what I need to do as a result of that change, but I need to know that it has changed. And I think that's kind of the use case that's being brought up in this RFC, which is why I mention it, or our RFC.
Yeah. So just to be mindful of time here, also I want to note that they did go investigate hooks, which I mentioned last week as well, or hook scripts. And it looks like they filed an issue saying that they don't seem to be running right now. So it does look like that might be a bug, because those also should be at least a way to be kicking off events and like post-install
pretty
events. So
pretty onerous way to get package mutation though, because you if you have that script there, you're going to get called like 1,000 times.
Sure.
I mean, that is not a good feature.
I'm not saying it's the right. I'm not saying it's the right solution, but just want to say there is a solution. And yeah, like there's obviously like you're essentially having to navigate through the weeds there. But I just want to at least update that it does seem like they went and tried to look at hook scripts and then have followed up with a bug report. So that's something that we can take away from the team. Just based on time, and we're only on the second item, I'd love to move on. If there's any other like feedback, or if there's a net new, either API or like ability for us to expose sort of like plugins or something into Arbus, like what you're speaking to, Isaac, with like other lifecycle events that you might want to plug into, specifically maybe in Arbus, then maybe we should start a separate RFC for that, or a separate conversation, unless it makes sense to just like carry on in this thread.
I think it's fine to carry on in this thread. I think also, so Gar was is in process of like organizing and bringing some structure to our documenting and specifying sort of what lifecycle scripts we run today and in what contexts and kind of what they mean. So I think once that exercise is done, we'll be in a much better spot to say, okay, here's a hole, or here's a missing use case.
Yeah. Cool. So if we can, we'll leave that open for now. We can leave the agenda label on it too if there's future updates in the thread. Want to move on to issue and RRC 324. So preferring, we've closed this out, but it was preferring peer dependencies over regular deps when both are specified.
Yep.
And I think you were the last to give some feedback there, Isaac, and then we close this.
Yeah, we went ahead and implemented that.
Cool. So I can probably just remove the agenda label then.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just kind of scanning over this. Yeah, we went ahead and implemented it. It was not hard to implement, and the one caveat is that we would, I think, only, yeah, we'll only save it as a peer dep if it's specified in both. I think we may have addressed that. I'm not sure.
Just, yeah, the last note, I think you said there might be a bit more work to preserve.
So yeah, we did
preserve the update.
We did preserve it in both places. So if it's specified in both peer deps and dependencies, we'll save it back in both places. We will, if they're different specs. So you say 1.x in prod dependencies and you say 2.x in peer dependencies, we're going to save back the one that we're using to both places. So we're not going to allow it to be two different specs, but we will preserve the duplication there.
Cool. In terms of any other?
Nope, no other comments.
Okay. So moving on then to Dom's RFC 323. I don't know, it doesn't look like he's on the call. This was really a pretty hefty, very large issue that was brought up. I'll share it here. It looks like, Jordan, you shared some thoughts, but as well, Wes, I think you commented here. Not sure if you want to share.
I recommended that he break it up, right? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, it's like five different issues.
Valuable, right?
Okay. Sounds like that's great feedback. So we'll leave it open for now and leave the agenda label. And I think the action item there is to break up. And just be mindful also. Not sure. Appreciate, Roy. It looks like you're taking notes again as you have before. So I just thought of that now. So appreciate that. Moving on, since there's no update there, then to PR and RC 117. So Roy, I can take notes if you'd like to share sort of an update here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So yeah, basically we have been moving forward with the implementation for running commands across workspaces. And we had a discussion internally just yesterday to try and flesh out the ideas from the RFC into actual implementation. So maybe I can share a little bit of the just quick in there proof of concept I put together, just so that we can actually look at the output and like talk about it in a more exemplified visual way. So basically, you can see my screen.
Yeah, can you blow, maybe increase the font size just for better clarity?
Sure, let me see if it's
Awesome.
not gonna mess up with my screen shared. Yeah, this should make it better, right?
Yeah, that's even better. That's good.
Okay, yeah. So basically, the way we have been proposing this in the RFC until today, up to now, it's basically defining a workspace configuration so that you can actually run a command in the context of a workspace or multiple workspaces. So basically going like, let's say I want to run fun, but in a specific workspace. So I would just specify workspace and the name of that given workspace. So that would basically run npm fun within the context of that workspace. So you can see that right now I have nothing here. But basically you can see that it tried to run npm fun in that workspace, just print the header. There's no dependencies installed there. So basically you can also maybe just print to show what the demo is doing here. So workspaces A and B. So in my current project here, I have an A and B folder, and these are properly linked within my node modules. So yeah, so that's where we're kind of going. But when we started putting down some of the implementation, we were discussing internally, we quickly noticed that it's probably a very good idea for the architecture point of view of the client to try and keep everything to a single place. So we're leaning more towards having a top level command just to help out internally, but also it also brings some benefits of avoiding some foot guns for the end user point of view. So we have been exploring going the route of npm WS or workspaces top level command, and then you specify the name of the command of the top level command from the client you want to run, and this should run that top level command across all the workspaces. So maybe a little bit more. So running fun here just as an example of a simple command, but it has nothing on it right now. But I can also just quickly show like ls, which right now in my proof of concept has a custom implementation that will just try and highlight the workspaces within your current install tree, unlike the regular npm ls from the top level, right? So yeah, this is all for the sake of discussing the syntax. It's a little bit of a syntax bike shedding, but we want to make sure we get it right. We have like a good user experience for the users of the CLI. And yeah, I think this is where we stop. I think two important changes, departures from the original ideas in the RFC that I'd like to highlight is that we're probably gonna narrow down the scope and take away the alias grouping idea, being able to define groups within the package JSON. So for now, we might punt on that, just for the sake of getting the basic functionality right. And instead, we were looking maybe now exploring a way you can send the path to a directory in order to run a group of workspaces within that directory. Like you could run a single command in all of them. So I think with that, I'll probably stop sharing here and we can open the floor for comments.
Yeah, thank you for doing that demo, right? I took some notes there while you're doing that. Jordan, I see your hands up, and then
Yeah.
Wes also gave a thumbs up. So
Yeah, it's in general, I think it's okay. It's a lot to digest, so it's hard to like form an opinion right away. I think that something that I would expect is that I have one set of commands to manage the workspaces in my project, and that I have a different command that says run like npm something like exec, let's say, where it runs npm exec in each of the workspaces I've specified, exactly like with the exact same semantics, so that in other words, I can, if I have a command that I run in the top level and it does something in a given workspace, I should be able to cd into that workspace and run the exact same command, but elide the workspace related parts, and then it should do the exact same thing. And if that's true, then I feel like my intuition will be met. And then the third comment, which is sort of arose from our discussion on the PR, is I'm not content with the dictionary of the glossary of terms. It feels really confusing to me that workspace can mean both the repo and the little projects in each one. And I've always avoided using the word workspace when I'm talking about this stuff, because I think intuitively I find it confusing. Maybe it's just me, but it would be really nice. Whatever terms we come up with here are going to become the way people talk about it, and be really nice if we could sidestep things like that.
I tend to think I found workspace should refer to the thing in packages / whatever, and like project or root project is kind of the root of the project. At least that's how we've been kind of being clear about it in our own internal communication about it. One thing
if there's any precedent with the Yarn community or Lerna that we can leverage here to make it easier for folks to understand, that would be super valuable, because I agree the terms are confusing, but I also haven't seen any precedent from Lerna or Yarn that I've heard in general conversation. So it might be that they don't have a great set of terminology to find either. But if they do, we should definitely try to leverage it.
It's like package versus module. Like there is a difference which matters sometimes, but in practice, people are pretty sloppy with their language just because that's how language is used. One thing I wanted to mention about the CD and then do it. That was actually the first proof of concept, was it would just set the prefix and run the command as kind of the default behavior. And there's a bunch of commands where that's totally appropriate. Like that is actually what you want to do, because the only thing it does, like if you run npm view with no arguments, right? It just looks at the current working directory package JSON, and then it uses that as the package name. Same if you run npm dist tag, npm author add, that kind of stuff. However, for some things, you kind of don't want that. What you want is something that's a little bit smarter. For example, if I run, if I do npm run build, right, to like build all of my CSS and JS across a bunch of different workspaces. If there's a workspace in there that doesn't have a build command, I don't want the whole thing to fail, right? Like I want it to just be like, okay, well, I ran 3 things. This one didn't have it, so it's probably fine. But if nothing has a build command because I spelled it wrong, I want that to fail. So there's kind of these subtle edge cases, and we're going through and putting each of the commands into a different bucket of either this needs its own custom thing, this can just be a CD and run it, this just shouldn't be a workspace command at all. Like if you run npm ws whatever, like maybe that should just fail. I don't remember now. We identified 5 different buckets, and I think once that's done, I think it'll become much more clearer about in terms of like how it needs to be kind of organized, and it might inform this whole process a little bit more.
So I see
to qualify my intuition, I just want to add, like, I think that thing should hold when the script exists in the workspace.
Right. Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. It should be like, what would be done and what would like give me the same reaction if I were to tell a human being who's intelligent, hey, run this for all the things, right? I would expect that human being would be like, oh, well, there's no build script here, I'll skip this one,
So Tierney, I see you have your hand up, and then also Roy.
Yeah. So one question, I assume that this is intended to, I think there was some discussion about this, so I just wanted to make sure that this is the plan. Is with npm WS or workspace, I assume WS is an alias. Is that planned to have the full set of npm commands? Like maybe not like, I don't know, log in, like I guess that doesn't make sense necessarily, but like, the ones that allow me to operate in my package, is that the plan, to have the full set no matter what?
That's what we
Yeah.
are. That's what we're in the process of figuring out, right? Like which ones make sense, and how do they make sense to be different between workspace and regular, or should they just not be implemented?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's definitely tied to what I was going to say. I was going to highlight maybe the 5 categories of top level commands that we kind of surfaced during our brainstorm session. And I think the question of whether or not we support them, like, definitely is tied to that. So it would basically be one category of things that just read from the install tree, one category of things that write to the install tree, and a third one that would be basically CD into that workspace and trying to run the top level commands. So basically setting the prefix for npm. So a custom implementation, which might be the case for some of the top level commands, and just do not apply at all, like things that doesn't make any sense. Like, should it support login, org, teams, right? So yeah, these are the kind of like 5 categories that we kind of surfaced, and we want to make sure we categorize the top level commands and make a decision about whether or not is it even worth to try and support them within the workspaces top level command. Yeah.
I think most common commands, though, if we get this right, most common commands, semantically, like as a human being, I could tell you, well, if you run this command with the WS subcommand, it'll just do what you would think, right? It'll do it in that workspace.
Yep. Makes sense. Great.
So I tried to capture the 5. If you can flush out that note there as well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I noted in the chat specifically, more demos more often. I would love for us to be sharing more often, and maybe even weekly, try to give updates as we move along here. So hopefully we can do that with folks as this progresses. And yeah, appreciate the feedback. In terms of that, any other questions or comments on what Roy just shared?
Well, so I wanted to mention one other thing. This has been brought up in conversation a few times, like every time we talk about workspaces, and I do not want today to be any different. That right now, the way that we sort of design the ideal tree with workspaces is pretty naive. Essentially, everything is always hoisted to the maximum extent that it can be, and workspaces are the same as linked deps. We probably want to do something a little bit more clever, or a little bit more thoughtful, at least, about what is shared, what is not shared, like what do workspaces have access to, because and I think doing that is its own kind of RFC that needs to happen and get be well specified. I don't think it needs to be dramatic, particularly, or a particularly like long and difficult RFC. It's just, it needs to be well specified so that we have it kind of documented in very clear language somewhere, with a pretty good comb through of edge cases.
Yeah, and I think it is also important to mention for Jordan's question initially. Like, I think the way we handle workspaces today in the style tree, it makes it impossible to have that affirmation you just did, like running a top level command like npm workspaces run script something where the category starts stop test, right? The same as CD into that workspace. Right now, with the install tree we have today, that's not possible, right? Because everything is hoisted to the top level. So adding npm workspaces test it's going to be a big win for enabling users to run the test script within any of the workspaces, but it's not going to be the same as cding into that folder and running it, right? I think it's an important distinction to make there with the install tree we have today. That's what Isaac said, like that's a totally different conversation that we need to have. We need to have that soon. But yeah, I think it's important to highlight that. And also maybe just together, I think what's kind of important from my point of view, and this from this call, kind of gather a sentiment of whether if we decide to just put all the commands behind the top level workspaces command, like, is that something that someone has a very strong feelings against, or is it fine from the group point of view? Because that's the departure from the RFC there originally.
Could you restate that question? I'm sorry. Like I said, it's hard to digest all this stuff.
Yeah. So basically, the way the RFC today is describing running the commands is basically like you would always type npm fund -w or -- workspace and the name of the workspace, right? But we're proposing changing that syntax to always enforce you to have ws after npm. So npm ws fund and then the workspaces you want to run in.
So the open question is, if I specify a workspace config, should that sort of implicitly make it run the WS version of the command? And if so, do we need the top level command? We probably still do need the top level command just to say, run this on all workspaces. And maybe running it just with one workspace is different. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that's my question, right? I have npm ws fund, let's say. That's fine to me. I don't care if it's npm ws fund or npm fund -ws or whatever. But by default, I would expect, as Isaac's asking, that it would run in every workspace. And then how do I then specify, how do I narrow that down?
That's the
is it npm
-w. That's the -w or -- workspace config option.
Okay. And that would that have to appear before fund, or could it appear at any random place in the
any random
string?
place, including environments or config files?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that seems workable.
The other story with npm config that you've been bringing up to Jordan.
Yeah, so in terms of like big rocks coming up in our RFC process, is probably worth mentioning at this point. There is the how do we lay out workspaces on disk? This API, bike shedding, which I think is pretty important. The lifecycle script stuff that Gar is working on, which I alluded to before. And also just in general, like kind of an overhaul of how we do config, which will most likely be a breaking change in V8. Even if it's just to deprecate certain things, like that deprecation is itself a breaking change in a lot of cases. In the meantime, though, I very much do not want to get us into another case or add another config that like only is relevant if it's specified on the CLI, because like adding any tiny grain of complexity to our config system, which is already super complicated and elaborate, is pretty, kind of takes us in the wrong direction, I think, until we have a very clear idea of what the future looks like.
Go ahead, Tierney.
So you in talking about that, Isaac, you made me think about like registries and stuff, and like now I'm thinking about how to configure registries per workspace.
Yeah,
it's gonna be interesting.
Right. I may want to have some of my workspaces be looking at my private registry and some of them
Right.
looking at the public registry.
I mean, I could also say that, like, at least, like, I can very easily imagine like a team in Microsoft having two different apps that point to two different registries because they publish to two different registries internally. And like we just want these two projects in the same workspace, or these two workspaces in this project, to point to these different ones.
Yeah, because you want them in the same project because it's the same team working on them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's gonna be rough. I wish you all the best of luck on that.
Wow. Thanks. Cool. Okay, so if there's no other comments on the RFC itself, Roy, I just want to double check, have we updated this again with the latest feedback, or are we going to be updating this? Okay.
I cleaned it up, and I'm gonna be pushing right after the call. I was hoping, with this feedback, I'm hoping to finish the cleanup there, and I'm gonna push new revision.
Yeah, the one big thing to note again is we're basically doing a bit of descoping with the removing the aliases / group support by out of the box, but that can be reintroduced and brought back at a later date, right? So I think that's a good thing to note, and something that's going to change in the RFC. So we can essentially parse that out and make it separate. Cool. Moving on, we have the two open RFCs by Gar. I saw that he had gone offline for a second, but potentially.
I'm back. I don't know that there's anything new to discuss on those.
I think there was an action item for us to go and potentially talk with our registry partners about what this looks like on their end to support, right? At least for the public registry. Was that one of the items that we took away, I think, last week? Okay. Maybe we'll just make a note then that that's still something we need to do. Roy, are you grabbing? Okay, thanks. See you grabbing issues and making notes. Cool. So if there's no, did anybody have any other feedback? I saw Wes did note, give some feedback within the last week, as well as DivFlow, to at least the adding multiple disk tags in the 319. But if folks don't have any comments right now, we can leave this open and essentially keep that conversation async for now.
Yeah, I don't think there was much controversy over like the disk tags thing. There was a little bit of back and forth internally about what it would mean implementation wise, as far as like how we define the tag config, or if we need to split that into two separate tags or two separate configs. Since we're kind of blocked on doing some follow-up with the registry side, we might want to take the agenda label off of this, take it off the agenda until we kind of check that box. What do you think?
We actually might not be blocked, right? I think that was another thing we noted last week, was actually we could go ahead and actually introduce this into apply and any other registry that obviously supported multiple disk tags could support this before the public registry. So like today, what would happen?
So we just ratify and implement it. We just implement it and call it a registry bug until they support it.
Sure, a registry bug. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we would call it a bug, but we could say that this is essentially like a feature of passing along this config to a registry, any registry that would support, setting multiple disk tags at once at publish time, then would get this benefit. So we don't have to necessarily block our work on it. So yeah, I would say the next step is like ratifying it if folks don't have any qualms about how it's written today.
I don't know. I would just say that the multiple disk tags. Oh, yeah, no, that was a different discussion. Yep, we're good on that. That's with the publishing, not set disk tag, right? Because set disk tag, as far as I know, that's an atomic endpoint, and we'd have to just call that multiple times, and that's noted in the RFC about how we can't make it atomic, and that's one of the things to consider when we ratify this.
Yeah, so I would say maybe leave it open for one more week and leave the agenda tag or label on it for now. Tag. Leave the label on it for now, and then next week, if there isn't any like staunch reasons why we can't implement this as is, then we can ratify it and then queue up the backlog, the work. Moving on then to the PR and RFC 317. This is for, so this is similar. This is publish and set the disk tag accordingly to December version number. I'm not sure. I see Wes and Jordan, you had given feedback to this. I'm not sure if we actually got to it. It might be essentially what spawned this these other RFCs by Gar.
Yeah, I think.
Well, so this comment in rationale and in alternatives is technically incorrect. You can set the publish config in package JSON, which is typically what I do. This is going to be tricky. Like if we start not publishing to the latest, like this is a much bigger change than it looks like.
I just pasted the rendered version for folks.
The main outcome from the last discussion I remember was that we would look at publish prompts first.
Right. Okay.
Right. So like the worry about it being a bigger change, maybe it won't be as big of a change since it would be behind a publish prompt in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I get very concerned when the rationale is, well, currently we do this thing and that doesn't make sense to me. And it's like, yeah, but we've been doing that current thing for 12 years. And I'm willing to bet somebody's depending on that and maybe doesn't even realize they're depending on it. So we should be extremely careful about changing it. And really look at like, what are the ramifications of changing it? What are the ramifications of not changing it? You know, like this doesn't make sense to me is not really an argument. Like show me the problem that it's causing and the problem that it's fixing.
I think the problem that they're saying it's causing is that people accidentally publish on latest all the time. And I know I do. So I assume that I've heard many other people complain about that. And it obviously it's fixable and we have a way to not do that, but that doesn't make it the right user experience either. So if we can make it easier for people to do the right thing on,
Yeah, so I think the solution there is let's add publish prompts. Now, obviously, if you're publishing from CI, you're not going to get those prompts. And okay, like set up your CI properly. In that case, you've already kind of gone through an elaborate process of writing down exactly what you want to have happen. So it's probably.
I mean, I think
Jordan. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. So as it is, there's a whole bunch of problems with the way npm publish works with automatically publishing the latest, as Wes has mentioned. I have made a package called safe publish latest that I use in my pre-published script on hundreds of projects because I have accidentally screwed this up multiple times. And basically what this does is it doesn't allow me to ever publish a version number older, like Sember wise, than the current latest, unless I explicitly indicate that that's what I want. It's caught me a number of times. That doesn't even so that might be a nice publish prompt also for npm itself. Like I would love for that package to be obsolete and for npm to just do this. Separately, adding the ability, like if we can make no dash tag actually publish without a tag, that would be glorious because then like anytime I have any concern about it, I can just, I mean, I could even set that as the default, and I could just never publish with a tag. And then I can always at my leisure publish to latest. That would even make it like, you know, anyway, yeah, I'll just stop there with that. But the other use case that I have is if I'm publishing a pre-release, I only rarely want that to be latest. And it would be really nice to just kind of automatically warn me, just like you're trying to publish an older version. Are you sure? You're trying to publish a pre-release? Are you sure? Mm-hmm. And I think that it would be nice if, like in V8, let's say, in a non-TTY, it just errored out, so that in other words, so that instead of just saying it silently does the wrong thing if you're in CI, if there's a different way to bypass it, like the safe publish latest uses you either change the tag or you use an environment variable. So we could do something similar with npm config and an argument. But like I think that there's, well, I think it's important
dash yes
to
would be dash yes. Yeah,
that's the way. That's fine, whatever it is. But the like, I think it's very. I think that the common case is exactly what npm already does. The problem is that the pitfalls when you're not in the common case can be pretty bad. So I think it's really useful if we try to mitigate that.
Yeah, just be mindful of time. We have about 4 minutes left. And so I think that the action item here is to potentially, again, reference publish response probably in the RFC itself. And then I want to give some time for the last, there's like 3 sort of, I would say pretty like meaty items here at the end, which I think we should probably either start with next week if we can't get to at least the next one, which is the RFC 314 for the registry protocol that Isaac, I know you proposed, and that there's been some conversation from like Zoltan and Mayal giving feedback here. I'm wondering, like, we've been waiting to essentially ratify this for a while.
Yeah, so there's an open question to dig into on this RFC, which is I depend on foo at registry : blah, blah, blah. And that depends on bar at 1.x. My expectation as a user, if I publish foo into a specific registry, is that my dependency on bar will come from that same registry, right? And if we then fetch bar from the original registry, the main registry, we're kind of violating that expectation. So I think something that needs to be fleshed out in more detail in that RFC is to say, when we are building the ideal tree, when we're resolving packages, effectively that registry specifier, all of its dependencies that are not, all of its dependencies that are a version or tag or alias need to effectively be converted to a dependency on that same registry.
Like an override. Go ahead.
Why do you think that is the assumption? I mean, this is a fairly net new thing, so I'm not sure that would be my assumption.
It's not a net new. Well, so it's not your assumption if you're. I'm saying if you're the publisher of foo, right? So I publish foo into my private registry and I depend on bar. I expect that bar will come from that private registry because anybody installing foo from the private registry is pointing at the private registry.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that's the way that I would expect it. Like a config value in npm-rc, yes, but well, today, I think that's that what happens.
Right. So today, if you have 2 things published into a private registry, if you can install one, you're going to get the other. Right, because you've configured it to talk to that registry.
Well, unless you're just assuming that all of your consumers are going to have an npm-rc that have targeted one scope to the private registry and the rest to a different one.
Yeah, that relies on those.
That's a viable assumption in a corporate environment.
So either they have mapped a scope and it's in the same scope, or they have not mapped a scope and they've set the top level registry config, in which case that's how you're getting it. But the only way to get this foo thing, which might be a namespace package or a non or a global package, the only way to get it will be by talking to that private registry, right?
But
So
again,
all
that's what I'm saying. If you have the config, but not necessarily if you have it as a spec in the package JSON. Like you may actually be intending to circumvent the spec, sorry, the config value by using these spec
registry
formats,
specifiers, yeah,
right? So like specifiers, that's the way we're calling it, yeah. So like I don't think that assumption always holds true. I think that if you expected the registry specifier to cascade,
Mhm.
it might be reasonable to say that you have to cascade it yourself manually by saying everything you think should be coming from that registry needs that registry specifier.
Okay, so let's say you're in a corporate environment and you set your
I
internal.
just want to be mindful of time,
Yes,
Isaac.
yes.
So.
I'll go really quick. You set your, and I'll flesh this out in the RFC as well. But let's say you're in a corporate environment, you're pointing at the internal registry. But now, new project, you want to use Express. So you add a dependency on registry npmjs.org #express. Express is not going to specify the registry and all of its dependencies. But now, if we try to fetch, all of Express's dependencies from your corporate registry, which is your top level registry config, it's going to fail. So I think it's more like when you're fetching something from a registry, the person who published into that registry presumably assumed that all of their dependencies would also be found from that registry, or else it's not installable anyway.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some more discussion to have on this.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, there's more discussions.
Yeah,
we can table it for later, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just I want to be mindful. I apologize.
So anyway,
we got kicked off a little bit late.
This needs to be its own RFC. I will fill it out and we will bring it up first time next time.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll pull these 3 up so they get some time next week. Appreciate everybody jumping on again, and thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And yeah, we'll be back same time, same place next week. Cheers.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Bye.